You see, when you're dealing with an avoidant, it feels like you're chasing a ghost. One moment they're warm, the next they disappear. They build walls, not because you're not enough, but because intimacy feels like a threat to their independence. The moment you stop begging for closeness, the moment you stop making their avoidance about you, is the moment everything changes, because here's the truth. Avoidants crumble when you finally understand that their distance is not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their fear. When you pull your focus back to your own life, when you stop waiting for them to show up and start living fully without them, they feel the shift. Suddenly, the control they had vanishes. They can no longer use distance as a weapon because you've stopped playing the game. This is when their walls start to shake. Why? Because they've spent their entire life running from closeness, but deep down they crave it. And when you no longer chase, you become the one person they can't ignore. So here's the truth. Avoidants don't crumble when you beg, plead, or try to fix them. They crumble when you finally see through the illusion, when you stop making their behavior your responsibility, and when you reclaim your power. Their avoidance isn't about your worth, it's about their fear. And this is one of the most freeing realizations you can ever come to when dealing with an avoidant partner, because the natural instinct when someone pulls away is to internalize it. You start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Why am I not enough? Why don't they want me the way I want them? That cycle of self-doubt is exactly what keeps you trapped in the emotional roller coaster of trying to win back someone who is never pushing you away because of your flaws. They were pushing you away because of their fears. When you begin to look at an avoidance behavior through that lens, it changes everything. Their silence after a vulnerable moment isn't because you overshared. It's because closeness feels like a trap to them. Their tendency to withdraw when things are going well isn't because they've suddenly lost interest. It's because the intimacy is becoming real, and real intimacy activates their deepest insecurities. The wall they put up is a defense mechanism, not a judgment on your value. It's easy to take rejection personally because love feels personal. You give your time, your energy, your heart. So when someone pulls away, it feels like they're rejecting you at the core. But avoidance is rooted in patterns that existed long before you. For many avoidants, closeness meant danger growing up. It meant suffocation, conflict, or pain. So they learned to survive by keeping distance. You may represent love, care, and stability, but in their nervous system, that still translates to risk. Understanding this doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior or tolerate neglect. It simply means you stop tying yourself worth to their reaction. You stop thinking, if I can just love them better, they'll finally stay close. Because the truth is, their staying power has nothing to do with how perfect you are. You could be the most patient, attractive, giving person in the world, and it still wouldn't erase their wiring. The only person who can face and heal their fear is them, and that's where your power lies, in remembering that avoidance is their story, not yours. When you stop taking their distance as a personal rejection, you regain control over your emotions. You stop spiraling into self-blame and instead see their withdrawal for what it is, a protective strategy they've used their whole life. The moment you internalize that, their behavior loses its sting. You no longer chase to prove yourself. You no longer bend yourself into someone unrecognizable just to earn scraps of closeness. That shift is magnetic. When you stand firm in the knowledge that you are worthy regardless of whether they can handle intimacy, you change the entire dynamic. You move from desperation to dignity, and while they may or may not rise to meet you, you've already won, because you've separated your worth from their fear. That understanding is what makes an avoidant crumble, not because you broke them, but because they can no longer control you with the illusion that their distance means you are not enough. Stop chasing, start living your own life fully. This is where the dynamic with an avoidant begins to turn. Most people, when faced with an avoidant partner pulling away, make the mistake of leaning in harder. They send more texts, they initiate more plans, they ask more questions, they beg for reassurance. All of it comes from a place of fear, fear of losing the connection, fear of abandonment, fear that the relationship is slipping through their hands. But what they don't realize is that chasing only feeds the cycle. The more you pursue someone who fears closeness, the more suffocated they feel, and the more they retreat into the very distance you're trying to close. The moment you stop chasing, you interrupt that pattern. And this isn't about punishing the avoidant or playing a cold game of manipulation. It's about reclaiming your center. It's about reminding yourself that your life has meaning, joy, and purpose beyond whether this person validates you or not. When you shift your focus back to your own growth, your own passions, your own happiness, something powerful happens. You stop radiating the energy of neediness. Instead, you embody independence, fulfillment, and confidence. That's the energy that not only frees you, but paradoxically, it often draws the avoidant closer because they no longer feel pressured. Living fully doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means caring about yourself as much, if not more, than you care about someone else's ability to show up for you. It means filling your calendar with things that light you up. It means nurturing friendships, diving into your work, your creativity, your health, your ambitions. It's rediscovering the version of you that doesn't wait around for texts, that doesn't freeze when someone withdraws, that doesn't hold their breath hoping for permission to feel loved. That version of you is magnetic, and more importantly, that version of you is free. Avoidants are used to having the upper hand. They know that when they pull back, their partner usually leans in. It becomes a dance they control. Distance creates pursuit. Pursuit creates more distance, and the cycle repeats. But when you no longer take the bait, when you no longer abandon yourself in the chase, you break the cycle entirely. Suddenly, their distance doesn't dictate your behavior. Suddenly, they can't predict your next move because your next move is not about them, it's about you. That shift rattles the foundation of the dynamic, and it's often the first moment they feel the ground beneath them start to shake. And even if they don't change, you've already won. Because you've reclaimed the time, energy, and mental space that used to be consumed by worry and turned it into fuel for your own life. You're no longer waiting by the phone. You're no longer rehearsing conversations in your head. You're no longer bending yourself in knots trying to decode their silence. Instead, you're busy living. You're busy being the fullest expression of yourself. And the irony is, when you do this, you often become the very thing an avoidant can't resist. The person who doesn't need them, but chooses them. That's when the chase ends and true power begins. The power shifts the moment you detach from their distance. For so long, when you've been tied up in an avoidant dynamic, it feels like they're the one holding the strings. They decide when to come close, and they decide when to pull away. They control the rhythm of the relationship simply by doing less, while you're left compensating by doing more. Every unanswered text, every cancelled plan, every period of silence starts to feel like a test you're constantly failing. And as long as you're reacting to their distance, they're in control. The game is tilted in their favor, not because they're stronger or wiser, but because you've unconsciously given them that power by making their behavior the compass of your emotions. Detachment changes that completely. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you build walls or become cold. It means you refuse to let their avoidance dictate your worth, your choices, or your inner peace. You begin to see their pulling away not as a verdict on you, but as a reflection of them. And with that clarity, you stop dancing to their tune. You stop chasing when they retreat. You stop rearranging your life around their availability. You stop waiting by the phone for a message that may or may not come. Instead, you take back your focus and your energy and reinvest it into yourself. The moment you do this, the energy of the relationship shifts dramatically. Because the avoidant has always relied on the silent assumption that you'll be there, no matter how inconsistent they are. They assume that when they vanish, you'll wait. When they return, you'll welcome them back without question. But when you detach, that assumption collapses. They can no longer predict your behavior, and that unpredictability shakes their sense of control. For perhaps the first time, they feel the weight of their choices because you're no longer cushioning the impact. If they disappear, life goes on without them. If they withhold, you don't crumble, you thrive anyway. That's when the balance of power flips. Suddenly, they're the one noticing your absence. They're the one questioning if they've lost their grip. They're the one realizing that distance no longer secures their safety. It threatens their connection. And while this can create discomfort for them, it also opens the door for something real to happen, because true intimacy can only begin when the dynamic is no longer controlled by fear and pursuit. Even more importantly, detachment empowers you regardless of what they do. Because the truth is, whether they crumble and come closer or whether they continue running, you've already broken free of the cycle. You're no longer the person who makes yourself small to fit their comfort zone. You're no longer the person who treats their avoidance like a mystery to solve. You're the person who knows your value, who chooses peace over chaos, and who won't hand over control of your happiness to someone else's wounds. That's the moment you become untouchable, and it's the moment they realize the game they've been playing doesn't work anymore. Avoidants secretly crave closeness but fear losing control. This contradiction is at the heart of their behavior, and it's what makes dealing with them so confusing. On the surface, they project independence. They act like they don't need anyone, as though emotions and intimacy are optional extras they can take or leave. But underneath that facade lies the same fundamental human desire everyone has, the desire to be loved, understood, and deeply connected. The problem is that for an avoidant, closeness feels like both a gift and a threat. It's what they long for the most, and yet it's also what triggers their deepest fears. When intimacy begins to deepen, an avoidant often experiences a spike of anxiety. Suddenly, the thought of being truly seen feels overwhelming. They equate vulnerability with loss of control. To them, letting someone in feels like handing over the steering wheel of their life. It's not that they don't want love, it's that love activates a part of them that says, asterisk, if I let you too close, I'll lose myself. Asterisk, so they build walls, withdraw, and create distance, hoping to protect their autonomy. This push-pull dynamic, wanting closeness but fearing it, keeps them stuck in relationships where neither partner feels fully satisfied. What many people misunderstand is that avoidance is not the absence of desire, it's the management of desire. An avoidant doesn't push you away because they don't care. They push you away because they care too much, and caring exposes them to the possibility of being hurt, controlled, or abandoned. They fear being swallowed up in someone else's emotional world, and so they cling to distance as a way to keep control over themselves. The irony is that the very strategy they use to stay safe is the one that keeps them from experiencing the love they secretly yearn for. When you see this clearly, you stop taking their mixed signals so personally. That text they left unanswered, it wasn't because you're not interesting. That sudden coolness after a beautiful weekend together, it wasn't because they stopped caring overnight. It's because closeness stirred up a fear they didn't know how to manage. They retreat not because they don't want you, but because they don't know how to hold both love and freedom at the same time. And here's the truth, the craving doesn't go away. Avoidants can suppress it, distract themselves, or pretend it doesn't exist. But deep down, the human need for connection always resurfaces. They may crumble when they realize you're no longer chasing, because your detachment confronts them with a reality they can't ignore. Their need for closeness is real, and it's slipping away. At that moment, the mask of control begins to crack. The more they feel they're losing you, the more they feel the tension between the independence they guard and the intimacy they crave. That inner conflict is what ultimately drives them to either face their fears or risk losing the very thing they wanted all along. They crumble when you reclaim your power and stop playing the game. For as long as you're caught in the avoidant dynamic, it feels like they're the one calling the shots. They control the rhythm by pulling away whenever things get too close, and you respond by leaning in, chasing, and trying harder. Without realizing it, you hand over your power every time you make their distance the signal that dictates how you show up. But the moment you break that cycle, the entire foundation of the relationship changes. When you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, stop proving yourself, and instead reclaim your dignity, you disrupt the very pattern that has kept them in control. Avoidants rely on the unspoken rule that their withdrawal will make you work harder. When they disappear, they expect you to wait. When they go silent, they expect you to fill the gap. When they give less, they expect you to compensate by giving more. That's how they maintain a sense of safety, by keeping the upper hand. But when you step out of that game, when you no longer bend to those unspoken rules, you remove their leverage. Suddenly, the tricks they've relied on for years no longer produce the outcome they're used to. That's when the cracks begin to show. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you stop centering your worth around their behavior. It means you no longer measure your value based on how much closeness they can tolerate. Instead, you begin to hold yourself with standards. You decide that your peace, your joy, and your emotional security are not negotiable. You refuse to accept breadcrumbs of connection in place of real intimacy. And when you do that, you stop being predictable. You stop being easy to manipulate. You stop being the person who makes their fear of closeness comfortable. That shift can feel shocking to an avoidant. Because underneath all of their defenses, they do want closeness. They may spend years trying to control it, to keep it on their terms, but when you reclaim your power, they feel the weight of potentially losing you. They realize that distance no longer guarantees safety. It now threatens the very bond they quietly crave. That realization is often the moment when an avoidant begins to crumble, not because you punished them, but because you broke the illusion that they could control love by running from it. Even if they don't change, you still win, because reclaiming your power isn't about forcing them to come closer. It's about setting yourself free. You become someone who isn't trapped in their cycles, someone who refuses to trade their self-worth for temporary attention. That kind of strength is unshakable, and the irony is, when you embody it, it often makes you the one person they can't easily walk away from. You're no longer playing the game, and without the game, they're forced to face the truth. If they want to keep you, they'll have to show up differently. And that, more than anything, is when their walls begin to crumble. At the end of the day, the real breakthrough isn't about changing an avoidant. It's about changing how you see yourself in the dynamic. The moment you stop chasing, stop personalizing their distance, and reclaim your own power, you break free from the cycle that's kept you stuck. Whether they rise to meet you or not, you've already won, because you've chosen peace, self-worth, and a life that doesn't wait on anyone's permission. That is where true strength lies. Thank you for giving your time, your focus, and your heart to this message, because the fact that you're here shows you're ready to step into a new chapter of power and clarity.